Well, first of all, thanks to Senator Nelson for his graciousness, and I want to thank both General Petraeus and Ambassador Crocker for their dedication and sacrifice. And obviously, our troops are bearing the largest burden for this enterprise. I think both of you take those sacrifices very seriously, and we appreciate the sacrifices that you yourselves are making. I want to just start off with a couple of quick questions, because in the parade of horribles that I think both of you have outlined, should we leave too quickly? At the center is Al-Qaeda in Iraq and Iran. So I want to just focus on those two things for a moment. With respect to Al-Qaeda in Iraq, it's already been noted they were not there before we went in, but they certainly were there last year, and they continue to have a presence there now. Should we be successful in Mosul? Should you continue, General, with the effective operations that you've been engaged in? Assuming that in that narrow military effort we are successful, do we anticipate that there ever comes a time where Al-Qaeda in Iraq could not reconstitute itself?
Well, I think the question, Senator, is whether Iraqi security forces over time with much less help could deal with their efforts to reconstitute. I think it's a given.
That's my point.
I think it's a given that Al-Qaeda Iraq will try to reconstitute, just as any movement of that type does try to reconstitute.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to sharpen the question so that, because I think you're getting right at my point here. I mean, if one of our criteria for success is ensuring that Al-Qaeda does not have a base of operations in Iraq, I just want to harden a little bit the metrics by which we're measuring that. At what point do we say they cannot reconstitute themselves, or are we saying that they're not going to be particularly effective and the Iraqis themselves will be able to handle the situation?
I think it's really the latter, Senator, that, again, if you can keep chipping away at them, chipping away at their leadership, chipping away at the resources, that comprehensive approach that I mentioned, that over time, and we are reaching that in some other areas already. As I mentioned, we are drawing down very substantially in Anbar province, a place that I think few people would have thought would be at the situation we're in at this point now, say 18 months ago. And again, that's what we want to try to achieve in all of the different areas in which Al-Qaeda still has a presence.
So I just want to be clear if I'm understanding. We don't anticipate that there's never going to be some individual or group of individuals in Iraq that might have sympathies towards Al-Qaeda. Our goal is not to hunt down and eliminate every single trace, but rather to create a manageable situation where they're not posing a threat to Iraq or using it as a base to launch attacks outside of Iraq. Is that accurate?
That is exactly right.
Okay. And it's also fair to say that in terms of our success dealing with Al-Qaeda, that the Sunni awakening has been very important. As you testified, the Sons of Iraq and other tribal groups have allied themselves with us. There have been talks about integrating them into the central government. However, it's been somewhat slow, somewhat frustrating, and my understanding at least is, although there's been a promise of 20 to 30% of them being integrated into the Iraqi security forces, that has not yet been achieved. On the other hand, the Maliki government was very quick to say we're going to take another 10,000 Shias into the Iraqi security forces. And I'm wondering, does that undermine confidence on the part of the Sunni tribal leaders that they are actually going to be treated fairly and they will be able to incorporate some of these young men of military age into the Iraqi security forces?
No, that is ongoing, Senator. As I mentioned, there's well over 20,000 who have already been integrated into either Iraqi security forces or other government positions. It doesn't just have to be the ISF. It can be other positions. and there are thousands of others who are working their way through a process with the Iraqi National Committee for Reconciliation in the Ministry of Interior and so forth. It hasn't been easy because in the beginning certainly there was understandable suspicion about groups that were predominantly Sunni Arab, although about 20% are actually Shia as well. But the process is moving. It's not been easy, but it is actually ongoing. And it is generally now a relatively routine process, although it takes lots of nudging.
Okay. Let me shift to Iran. Just as, and Ambassador Crocker, if you want to address this, you can. Just as it's fair to say that we're not going to completely eliminate all traces of al-Qaeda in Iraq, but we want to create a manageable situation. It's also true to say that we're not going to eliminate all influence of Iran in Iraq. Correct? That's not our goal. That can't be our definition of success, that Iran has no influence in Iraq. So can you define more sharply what you think would be a legitimate or fair set of circumstances in the relationship between Iran and Iraq that would make us feel comfortable drawing down our troops?
Senator, as I said in my statement, we have no problem with a good, constructive relationship between Iran and Iraq. The problem is with the Iranian strategy of backing extremist militia groups and sending in weapons and munitions that are used against Iraqis and against our own forces.
Do we feel confident that the Iraqi government is directing this aid to these special groups? Do we feel confident about that, or do we think that they're just tacitly tolerating it? Do you have some sense of that?
There's no question in our minds that the Iranian government, in particular the Quds Force, is this is a conscious, carefully worked out policy.
If that's the case, can you respond a little more fully to Senator Boxer's point? If in fact it is known, and I'm assuming you've shared this information with the Maliki government, that Iran's government has assisted in arming special groups that are doing harm to Iraqi security forces and undermining the Iraqi government, why is it that they're being welcomed the way they were?
Well, we don't need to, again, tell the Prime Minister that. He knows it.
Okay.
And is trying to take some steps to tighten up significantly on the border. In terms of the Ahmadinejad visit, you know, Iran and Iraq are neighbors. A visit like that should be in the category of a normal relationship.
Okay.
I think what we have seen since then, in terms of this very clear spotlight focused on malign Iranian influence, puts that visit into a very different perspective for most Iraqis, including Iraqi Shia.
Okay.